everybody. It's Laurie White with the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce with episode number 163 of Chamber TV, another in our continuing series of discussions with distinguished candidates that are seeking public office in Rhode Island. And today we are focusing on the mayoral race in Providence, and we've have a whole array of folks that we have been talking to and will continue to talk to just to get a sense of how the candidates are feeling about the issues, some of the big themes they see in the city of Providence, and most importantly, how the members of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce can work with the next mayor to ensure that we continue to prioritize economic development and workforce development and a healthy, safe Providence. So with that, I'd like to welcome our guest, Nirva LaFortune, and she's presently a city councilwoman in the city of Providence, and she is running for mayor. We are very excited to chat with you today, so welcome, Nirva.
Thank you, Laurie. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Fantastic. So I want to say first and foremost that in preparation for this interview, I was looking at your website, and I think it's amazing. You did a fantastic job really laying out the issues and your case for seeking the office of mayor in the city of Providence. So congratulations to you on that. You have a very compelling backstory. So let me ask you to share that with our audience.
Thank you. And I'm glad that you had an opportunity to check out the website. The issues regarding Providence matter to me. I grew up in the city of Providence. My family still lives here. And so prioritizing the issues and also having a plan to address them to move our city forward is quite important for me and our city. So I grew up in the city of Providence. I grew up in the South Side Washington Park neighborhood. In fact, my parents have lived there in the same house for over 31 years. But my journey here started before that. We moved to Providence. Well, first my parents came, and then I followed them at the age of 3. And we were escaping the fall of a dictatorship in Haiti. And like many immigrant families, I was separated from my parents and was fortunate enough to be able to join them. And so I grew up, like I said earlier, in the South Side, West End, Dexter Street, Dartmouth Avenue, and then my parents now live in Washington Park. I'm a product of Providence Public Schools. My children are also products of Providence Public Schools. My son is a rising junior in college. My daughter is a middle schooler here. And I've been a city councilwoman for about 5 years now. Providence is my home. It's my heartbeat. And it's important that we have a leader who not only has the professional experience. I've been in higher education for over 15 years, in fact, close to 20 years now, as an administrator and a first and second year advisor. But we also need someone who understands the needs of our residents, who've lived the experiences of our residents. And I'm confident that I will be the person to work with our community, our city, to move it forward to the future that it deserves to be in.
Thinking back, Nirva, to past mayors, and let's go back a couple of decades. Let's go back to let's say the 90s as an example, or early 2000s. How do you think the city has changed since then?
Mm-hmm. So I grew up in that era. In fact, the mayor then was Cianci, and I'm a recipient of the Mayoral scholarship that was given out to one high school kid at every Providence Public School high school. So I think from the 90s, 2000 to now, we've seen a shift in our neighborhoods. Our city is more diverse than it was before. We have folks who are here who represent various countries throughout the world, and they're right here in Providence. But we still have some significant issues that impact our city. We have a pension liability crisis that have existed for quite some time now. As a junior city council person, that was one of the first issues that I worked on with my former councilman, Senator Zurier, and we worked on the report outlining recommendations and how to address it. And now the POB, the pension obligation bond, is at the General Assembly, and voters, pending the decision at the State House, will have an opportunity to vote on that. but our city has had some significant financial issues and housing issues, which continue and we continue to struggle with, as well as education. We've had mayors after mayors who've talked about education, but we haven't made a dent. The reports that have come out since I was in school in the 90s, they say the same things, but we have yet to address them. Our buildings are falling apart. And I don't think even in my lifetime, we've had a mayor who've had their children in our public schools. Not only am I a product of Providence Public Schools, but I have my children there. And I would be the first mayor to have in my lifetime, to have a background in education. So I think a lot of the issues that exist, some of them are a result of our educational issues. If we were to provide every single resident, every kid, regardless of what neighborhood they live in, with a quality education, we would have more people who are interested in living in the city of Providence. We would see more businesses fighting to invest in our city. And also we would address the economic gap, and our city would be much safer as well.
I want to pick up on what you said about urban education and tie it to what you're doing now professionally. So can you walk us through your role today at Brown University and some of the work that you are doing on the urban education front?
Thank you. So I've been, as I stated earlier, I've been an administrator in higher education for close to 20 years now. I've worked at a public institution, Temple. I've worked at a private institution, Drexel University, where I also taught. And I've worked at an Ivy League, Brown. So the work that I do is I work with students from various backgrounds, but particularly students from historically underrepresented groups, students with the highest financial need. And I help create pathways for their success so they can have access to things that they sometimes normally don't have access to because of the hidden curriculum, or things that they don't know because they might be first gen like I was, or they're from an immigrant background like I am. And so what we do is fill in the gaps and create pathways of opportunities and success, from creating programs so that they can have access to research and internship opportunities, to providing holistic advising, and also making sure that these students feel confident in the spaces that they're in, through quality advising, to working with different entities. And also as an administrator, I came to Brown to oversee academic programs and student affairs in the School of Engineering, but now I work in the Curricular Resource Center as an assistant director, where I've managed staff. I've also developed programs, training opportunities, training and development opportunities for my team. So there's the administrative part of the work, but there's also the support part of the work. And as a leader in a city, sometimes we don't always see it from that perspective. Yes, you're the CEO of the city of Providence, but part of the work that you're doing is creating a team so that people have access to government and government can work for all people. And it's very similar to the work that I do, regardless of what the student's background may be. The institution has to work for them in order for them to be successful. That means making sure that things are accessible, resources, tools are accessible to them. And that's what I hope to do as the next mayor.
You have a unique vantage point on the issue of public education because in your day job, if you will, you are the recipient. So the pipeline is feeding into you, and you are able to see really close up what some of the issues are relative to student preparation and achievement. So my question is, what do you think from a City of Providence perspective, thinking, of course, about the new superintendent of schools and the state takeover of the city schools? What is your point of view on how to make rapid progress? And you mentioned, some of the issues are the same when you were there, and the reports and the like. So what under a Nirva LaFortune administration, what would be new and unique and different?
Yeah. So, not only in my work, but I studied urban education policy at Brown. That's what I obtained my graduate degree in. One of our first research projects was looking at working with Providence Student Union as well as the school district to look at ethnic studies curriculum throughout the country. And we actually produced the report that outlined how ethnic studies can be implemented in the city of Providence in the district. There are some significant issues. One, we need to have a plan that we actually stick to. The turnaround plan outlines the goals that we want to reach for our students to improve the quality education that we're providing our kids with. But we need the pathway to get there. And so as mayor, what I would like to do, one, is to create a plan. The comprehensive plan should also have enlist how we are going to get our schools back in district control. Because I think right now with the state takeover, there were a lot of promises that it would be, there would be the stakeholders, which are the parents, the teachers, the students, would be at the table, be a part of the decision-making process. But that has not been the case. And we have seen controversy after controversy throughout the takeover. And so I think it's important for us to have our schools back, but we can't have them back in the condition that our school system is in right now. So first is creating a comprehensive plan, building on that turnaround plan so that we have a pathway. And the pathway also includes a plan to get our schools back in district control. We have to set the conditions at the city level, fixing our buildings. I was part of the first initiative that Treasurer Magaziner worked on around fixing our schools. My kids are in the ad. I worked with the team to get people to vote on that piece of legislation so we could pass the bond so that we could fix our school buildings. East Providence just built a brand new high school, and our schools are still falling apart in Providence. So the first step is setting those conditions, fixing our school buildings, investing more in after-school programs and opportunities, partnering with our universities. I went to Brown Summer High School as a kid, when I was a high school kid, a student, but we're not sharing any data. How do we know what the correlation is between students who participate in these types of programs and academic success? We also should be targeting students who might experience summer learning loss, who need that additional support, and also sharing the curriculum. We should also work towards creating a teacher pipeline program, very similar to the Boston Teacher Residency program, to produce more teachers who look like the students that they're serving, but also provide them with mentorship and support so that they could stay in the field. And also make it more easier for teachers who are coming from New York or Boston or Connecticut, our neighbor, to teach in the state of Rhode Island, in the city of Providence. And more importantly, we have to focus on the whole student. It's not just about test scores. I'm not someone who tests well. There are a lot of kids who don't test well. But our kids need additional opportunities like arts and culture within our school buildings. They need after-school resources, but we need to focus on the whole student, providing them with social emotional support, which I passed legislation to increase that in our school buildings, so our kids have access to that so they could focus on learning. But we have to set those conditions. And if we're not setting the conditions and we don't have a comprehensive plan that we stick to, we're just going to keep going in circles and we're never going to resolve our educational issues.
You mentioned the teacher pipeline, and we have been discussing that at the chamber level through our education council. And last week we met our institute at Brown about this very issue of the teacher pipeline and what we need to do as a city, as a community, to begin the recruiting process earlier in the year rather than waiting until late spring, early summer. And also some of the other stumbling blocks that they've encountered would be the difficulty around housing, affordable housing, and then entry-level salaries for teachers. So I'm wondering, do you agree with those findings? And Is there a place somewhere in the country that you've had your eye on that you think does it especially well?
So starting the recruitment earlier is a first step, but we also have to figure out how to recruit teachers from diverse backgrounds, teachers of color in particular, and also set the structure to support them so that they don't leave. There are studies that have shown that we may attract these teachers of color, but then they leave after a certain amount of years because of burnout. And so there are a couple of things that we can do. One, we've had a teacher academy at Mount Pleasant High School, the high school that I went to, for years now. I spoke with Dr. Sanchez a few years ago about working Mount Pleasant High School in the district, working with Rhode Island College and some of our other institutions to create a pathway starting in high school. So in junior year, those students could be taking classes at RIC, preparing them for the entrance exams to get into those educational programs. But also having a statewide teacher residency program, I think it's important, because you want to not only attract teachers, but train them to be in the classroom. So spending a year co-teaching and then teaching on your own, but then also partnering those new teachers with a mentor, a more experienced teacher. I think it's key. And providing continued professional development opportunities for new teachers as well as senior teachers. And I know that there was some work in the contract to loosen it up a bit so that we can attract more teachers. But we also need to do a little bit more targeted work and hear more from the teachers of color and listen to them, because they've shared some of their experiences and not feeling supportive, as well as our administrators. Again, it's about sticking to a plan, staying on task, trying to address some of the core issues that impact our students, working with the state to reform the funding formula. Right now, the funding formula does not weigh for English language learners. There's the same weight the same weight is provided for students who receive free lunch and reduced lunch. So we need to reform that. But again, it's all about providing a holistic educational experience for all our students and working with our partners. We have PASA. My children have gone through PASA. It is an exceptional program, after school program. We have arts programs throughout the city. We have our institutions. We should be working with them to create a curriculum for our teacher residency program, working with them to provide more summer out of school learning opportunities. We have our community libraries where a lot of students, like my own kids and myself, go for tutoring or to use the library, the computers and to take out books. We should make sure that we're investing in those resources, in those entities, so that, again, we can continue to provide students with the resources and the tools that they need to be successful. It's all about educating our whole student. And finally, in our state constitution, the language, the right to an adequate education doesn't exist. In Massachusetts, it does, but in the state of Rhode Island, it does not. So we need to ensure that that language is there so that we can hold our leaders accountable. If our kids are not receiving a quality education, that's going to be critical. Because a lot of our kids who suffer are kids from vulnerable communities, students with differential learning and needs and special education. And so all these areas we need to invest in. But again, we have to start at the top and put the funding into it so that we can provide our kids with the quality education that they deserve and need. And then you asked about, like, what are some cities, looking at different cities throughout the country. Public education is tough. And I think there are a lot of, there are different districts where they have schools or certain programs that are doing well. But I think across the board, public education has struggled, particularly in urban communities. But there are schools like Science Leadership Academy, which is a public school in Providence. So in Philadelphia, not Providence, but we can look at that model. We can look at models in Massachusetts. We can look at models in Seattle, Washington, and also Washington, D.C. did some work in reforming their schools. And we could just take some of these things and try to create a school district that works for all of our students.
Certainly, the issue of public education is incredibly important to the business community in Providence and elsewhere. So let's open the lens a bit and talk a little bit about your view of small business in the city, issues around the financial institutions and the financial district, and what we need to do to continue to make the city of Providence, both in the downtown and in the neighborhoods, a place where investors and um, employers feel safe to create jobs and to locate satellite offices, if you will, a place that's reasonable from a tax burden perspective, a place that's safe. So your view on business in general, and
Mhm.
you mentioned it, it's in our DNA. The DNA of the infrastructure is
Mhm.
part of how we're going to continue to move forward as a city.
Yeah. So yes, so our small businesses and our local businesses are part of our is part of the DNA of our economic infrastructure. My great uncle had a small business on the West End on Messer. And growing up, I would hang out with him at his tailor shop. And I just saw how he was so engaged and part of the community and the unchanging community there. And I've talked to a lot of our small businesses, and one of the things that they always talk about is our educational system and being able to hire locally and qualified locals workers from Providence. And so one, again, we have to fix our schools, but we also have to have a government that works for our small businesses. What I've heard from them is that it's hard to do business in Providence. Sometimes it feels like you have to know a guy or know a person just to get things done. And part of my plan is to create an office, kind of like a concierge office, to help our small businesses, people who have small businesses or are looking to expand their small businesses, who are interested in doing business in Providence, to navigate that process, to share resources with these businesses, and to also create opportunities to connect them with one another. So I think that is critical. We already have one of the highest commercial tax rates in the country. So if we want to attract our businesses here, we also have to cut out some of the bureaucracy to make it easier for people to invest in the city of Providence, our young entrepreneurs to do business here, and also to stay here. I think it's I think it's critical.
Yeah, so we see the tangible tax, as you correctly point out, the commercial tax being incredibly onerous, against a backdrop of a city, and then we also talked about the pension obligation bonds and the crowding out of other investments in areas that are much needed. So where do you find that balance?
Well, we have to make the city affordable. So earlier, and I don't think I answered the question, you talked about even teachers finding housing. I believe like in San Francisco, they did a program to provide some subsidized housing for teachers. So to balance it out, I think we have to make Providence more affordable for our residents, whether you're someone who lives here or someone who lives here and also wants to start a small business. So we need to build more housing. Because it's supply and demand. The supply right now, it's low. We have a low housing stock. We've had a low housing stock for years. We have ARPA funds that came in, American Rescue Plan Act funds. The city of Providence should be working with the state to maximize those funds to build more affordable housing. We also don't have to necessarily recreate the wheel. We have models that exist, like West Elmwood Housing. It's inclusionary zoning development, where there are some of the apartments are subsidized and then people are paying market rate. That balances it out. But we need to just make our city more affordable, make it easier for people to get around. And I think right now that is an issue, but also the quality of life. what I've heard from business owners and residents is that they want to improve the quality, they want their quality of life in Providence to be improved. That means ensuring that our city is safe. Again, it's affordable, and also accessible. This is a great city. Um, you can drive 20 minutes and you get to the closest beach. It's a walkable city. When you get to the downtown area with the Michael Van Leesten Bridge at night, it is spectacular. We have a top-notch arts and culture scene in the city. We have exceptional restaurants. I chose to move back home to live here, to raise my children here. And I want people to get excited as I do when they are living, when they, come visit Providence or they're thinking about living here, because it is a wonderful place. And so, but we have to make it affordable so that everyone can live here, whether you're a teacher, whether you're in the service industry, whether you're a CEO of a company. It should be affordable, or whether you're on a fixed income, you should be able to afford to live in the city of Providence. So I think that's one of the biggest pieces to make it more affordable for everyone.
I had an opportunity to see you, albeit at a distance. We were both at the Industrial Trust Tower press conference a couple of weeks ago at the State House, where plans were unveiled to hopefully rescue that building. So what are your thoughts about the unique capital stack that was put together to revitalize that building and also to carve out affordable housing units for people in the area? What do you predict will happen with this effort, and do you think it needs to be tweaked at all?
I am so excited to get the full plan at the city council level to review it. I'm excited about the investment being made in that development. It's sat dormant for far too long. I still remember going into Fleet Bank with my dad as a kid. It's a beautiful, the architectural work in that building is absolutely spectacular. It's a beautiful building. What I do hope to see is that, because I want to move forward with this project, but the affordable housing component has to work. We live in a city where the median income household is about $40,000. And right now with the AMI, the average median income, they're putting it as 100% for housing. So most residents, the average resident in Providence couldn't even afford to live there. And the average resident who might be a teacher, who might work in a nonprofit, who might work in higher education. And so what I would like to see is for that AMI to be lower to 80% or lower than that, even 60%, just to make it a bit more affordable for our residents. I also want to see a push to ensure that our minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses have access to some of the project contracts. I know they're going to do their best effort, but I hope that the city works diligently to make sure that these minority-owned businesses know about the contract, they're applying, they're a part of the RFP process. But the thing that's most important to me is the affordability component. If we're going to invest 20% of the units to affordable housing, we're using funding from the trust fund that I was a co-sponsor in setting up that goes towards affordable housing. We need to make sure that we're committed to that. And hopefully we can lower that AMI, and I'm going to be a strong advocate. But I'm very excited about that project. I look forward to it. And this is a start to creating more housing in the city of Providence, but also ensuring that every development going forward, there's affordable housing that's included in it.
Now, that's an interesting idea, the notion of setting aside affordable housing units for teachers teaching in the city of Providence. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, that could be a way to attract new teachers in the city and also teachers who are currently teaching in the city to attract them to live in the city that they're working in. Before the charter was lifted, teachers, firefighters, police officers, city workers, they lived in Providence. I remember seeing my teachers at the grocery store, walking to the librarian, to the library. They were here. Kids saw them. They understood the communities that they served. So I would love to incentivize have some sort of incentive program for teachers and other municipal workers like our police officers, so that we can attract people who not only live in the city, who not only work in the city, but live in the city that they're serving. And that's part of the building community as well.
In the minute or so that we have left, Nirva, can you outline how people can get in touch with you and what your thoughts might be about working with members of the business community and the chamber?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can get in touch with me by going to votenirva.com, votenirva.com. And also check out my priorities section, which outlines my plans for the city of Providence. So for me, the most important thing is creating a city, our city, for our future. That means prioritizing those key issues: education, economic development and opportunity that is accessible, housing, making government work for all people, creating safe communities, but also the basics: fixing up our sidewalks, picking up trash when it needs to be picked up, and making sure that our streets are clean and beautiful. And also investing in our youth so that we could create pipelines for them, and working with our businesses to have internship opportunities for our young people, so that we can fill those gaps. But we need a mayor who's committed to the work, who has been doing that work, who has the professional as well as the lived experience. And again, I'm confident that I will be the mayor. And the time is now to elect the first woman to be the mayor of Providence, and someone who has a background in education, who understands the concept of accessibility and making sure that government works for all people. So I'm very excited about this journey, and I do hope that you go to my website at votenirva.com and support this grassroots movement.
Nirva LaFortune, first mayor of the city of Providence, female mayor of the city of Providence, potentially. It's been a pleasure to be able to talk with you here on Chamber TV, episode number 163. And we invite you to come back again to share some of your thoughts and ideas as the campaign continues to progress through the spring and summer months and early fall. So it's been a pleasure and an honor to get to know you, and we wish you well.
Thank you so much, Laurie, and have a wonderful day.
You as well.
Thank you.